Okay, here is our third module on, or our third segment on justice and distributive justice. And in this segment, I'm going to talk about how utilitarians come up with an argument for a fair distribution of resources. Recall, one of the problems with utilitarianism is it's actually usually not fair, right? You can, or not, it hasn't. There's no part of it that says that the distribution, when you aggregate, you try to make the largest aggregate of happiness, and it doesn't matter if some people are really, really happy and some people are not. Usually the utilitarians are not thought of as being fair, but there is an argument within utilitarianism that leads to equality, some sort of equality of resources. Utilitarianism is, in some sense, a democratic theory. It's based on equal consideration of everybody's interests. It assigns the same weight to everyone's interests when in the aggregation of interests when you're trying to maximize. And this seemed to people like Bentham and Mill an improvement on giving more weight, let's say, to the interests of aristocrats. This can, under certain conditions, lead to a theory of justice that leads to equality of resources. So you get an indirect utilitarian theory of justice, which claims that this equal consideration of interests will lead to equality of resources because of the diminishing marginal utility of income. And I'm going to go through this argument and show you what it depends on and what the problems are with it. Now, you'll have to remember a few things from first-year economics. The total utility of a group of goods or services is just the sum of all the utility produced by the consumption of those goods. The marginal utility is the additional utility gained by an incremental or additional unit of that good being consumed. And the law of diminishing marginal utility says that as you consume more and more of a given economic good, that the additional utility that you get from each item you consume, each unit, tends to decrease. The diminishing marginal utility, and it grounds the way that the demand curve tends to fall from the left to the right and so on. So you're familiar with that. And here's an example. Imagine somebody is eating candies, and as they consume candies, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, they get more and more utility. So from one candy, total utility is 3. From 2, it's 5. From 3, it's 6, so on. But the additional utility that the person gets from each candy starts to diminish. A lot from the first candy, less from the second candy, just 2, 1 from the third candy, and finally no utility from eating any more candies after 3. And perhaps if you imagine 5, 6, 7, you might even start to see the marginal utility going down because the person just doesn't sick of them. Okay, so that's simple background here on candies. I'm going to show you a little bit about how you can have a utilitarian theory of justice in the distribution of candies, basically. Here's a graph. As the number of candies goes up, the utility gained goes up, but at a reduced rate, diminishing marginal utility. Okay, so here is an argument for the equality of the distribution of an equal number of candies between two people. And let's see how it goes. There's only 4 candies to distribute. So if Anne gets 4, Bob only gets none of them. Or if Anne gets 3 of them, then Bob can have 1. Okay, so there's 4 candies, and they're connected in this way. As Anne consumes more and more candies, her total utility goes up. First one by 3, then by 2, then by 1, then by 0. Okay, so built into this from the little table earlier is the diminishing marginal utility of candy eating. Bob's utility goes the same way, except Bob is going in the other direction here, right? When Anne gets 4, Bob only gets none. His total utility is none. When his first candy, when Anne gets 3, he gets 1. His first candy gives him 3, 5, 6, 6. Okay, now the utilitarian says to maximize total aggregate utility. So you add up Bob's and Ann's utility and you maximize it. Well, I've done this for you here. 6 and 0 is 6, 6 and 3 is 9, 5 and 5 is 10, and you can see that this distribution here is the one that maximizes total utility, i.e. an equal distribution of candies between Ann and Bob maximizes utility. So it seems like the possibility of a theory of fair distribution is perhaps built into utilitarianism. Well, there's a caveat, and the caveat is this: you only get the equal distribution if Ann's and Bob's utility functions are the same. If Ann gets 3 from 1, 5 from 2, etc., and Bob the same. Okay. If there are any differences, then the argument breaks down, and there's no real reason to think that we all get the same utility from candies. Some of us really like them, some of us don't. I actually don't much like candy. Now, let me just show you how some of the things that can go wrong here. Another way is based on people's preferences about what other people have. Okay, and if you try to satisfy that, you get a problem of unfair preferences. Here's the same Ann and Bob, and the same problem distributing the candies, but in this case, Bob is jealous of Ann, and Bob's utility is reduced by 2 utiles for every utile of enjoyment that Ann receives from her candy. Okay, so now look what happens. So when Ann gets 4 candies, she has 6 utiles, Bob has 0, but even that 0 is reduced by twice the number of utiles that Ann has. Here's Ann's 6, and here is here we're multiplying it here twice. Take minus 2 times 6 minus 12. Okay, now work our way through this table, and for example, when Ann gets 2 candies and Bob gets 2 candies, Bob gets 5 from his normal enjoyment of candies, but he loses 10 because Ann is getting, he doesn't like he doesn't want Ann to have any pleasure, and it's still minus 5. And if you do this calculation, you find that aggregate utility is actually maximized here at 6, and but it's now the distribution is no longer equal. Bob has been able to make a distribution in his favor, so that Bob gets 4 candies and Ann gets none, simply by being jealous of Ann's candies. And this starts to suggest that there's a real problem with the way utilitarian theories of justice. Diminishing marginal utility of income is a very important thing, but it doesn't really result in a very good theory of justice, because people's utility functions, their function that transforms goods and services into utility, is different for different people, and because they can have utilities, different reactions to how much pleasure other people get. So here is a question for you. This is the problem of inexpensive preferences, and the thing is, Bob is a really efficient creator of utility. He gets 3 times as much utility from a candy as Ann does. Which distribution maximizes utility? And then we'll look at why. So pause the video, look at this for a second, and I'll be back. Okay, this is actually a really easy question. Which distribution maximizes utility? Well, you just look down here. Here's the aggregate utility: 6, 15, 20, 21, 18. The answer is 21, and therefore the answer is D. Okay, but it's interesting to understand how this came about. Notice, first of all, that this is no longer a distribution, an equal distribution. It's no longer a distribution C with 2 candies each. This is 1 candy to Ann and 3 candies to Bob. So it's not what we normally think of as a fair distribution. And it arises because Bob gets more pleasure from candies than Ann does. Their utility functions are not the same. And you can see this going on here. If Ann gets 3 candies, right, then she gets 6 units of pleasure. But so therefore, if Bob gets 3 candies, he gets 3 times as much. So let's look to where Bob gets 3 candies here, and he gets 3 times as much as Anne would have got, which was 6, which is 18. Okay, that's how this table is constructed, and you can work through it if you like. But the thing is that because they have different utility functions, the distribution is no longer equal. And you can kind of see that without having to go through these tables, I guess. It's just that the idea that the maximal aggregate total of utility will also equalize people's utilities depends on this idea that everybody has the same way of turning resources into utility. All right, so I'll see you in a few minutes.